Hi, in this lecture, we're going to be looking at EQ. So EQs are used to actually change the frequencies of a signal. So this might be because you want to help a track fit in with the mix, or it might be that you want to make the sound be a bit more interesting. There are actually two types of EQ. We have a graphic EQ and a parametric EQ. Graphic EQs are the EQs that have the sliders. These are used often for live mixing, where you can ring out the room. And parametric EQs, these are the ones you will get in digital audio workstations, like the EQ8 we're about to look at. So let's just get EQ8, and I'm just going to drag it onto this bass track. I just quickly made a loop, and I'll just play this loop now, and we're going to go through and just EQ this a bit. The mix is a bit of a mess at the moment. Let's go through and just drag this EQ8 over to this first instrument, which is the bass. And it's called the EQ8 because you have an 8-band EQ. At the moment, there's just 4, but we can actually turn on all 8 if we wish. And each of these bands actually has a filter shape to determine what it's actually doing. So we have a list of them here. So we have a couple of high pass, then we have a shelving filter, and then we have a band pass, then we have a notch, then a high shelving filter, and then we have a couple of low pass filters. So each one of these we can choose any of these different filter shapes. So let's have a look at this EQ. So we have these 3 knobs on the left: frequency, gain, and Q. So frequency, this sets the center frequency of a band of a frequency. So let's have a look at frequency. Let's select 1, and we can scroll across and it will choose the frequency. We can drag this, or we can use this knob here. Then we have a gain knob. So this will obviously increase the gain of the frequency or decrease the gain of the frequency. And if we choose a different shape, you'll see when we increase or decrease the gain, it will create a different shape. And then going down, we have this Q knob. So this allows us to affect a tighter range or a wider range. So we can tighten this. Let's just increase the gain. So we can widen or tighten this range of frequency. We also have a graphic analyzer. So when we play this loop, you can see the frequencies in this graphic analyzer. So I'm just going to solo this bass line. I'm going to drag this down, and let's just play this. And here we can see graphically the frequencies. So let's just pull this down and just widen the Q. And you can see here which frequencies it's reducing or increasing. So this allows us to see what frequencies might be missing, or what frequencies are taking up maybe too much space. We have this little play button here, this triangle. If we click this, it will expand this EQ. So let's just play this bass part again, and then let's expand this. And you'll notice now that we have a frequency for each of these bands. So we have a frequency and a gain and a Q for each one of these bands. So it just expands out the EQ. So let's turn on 5 and 6, and let's just move, say, 6. And you can see here it's moving the gain. If we move it along, it's moving this frequency dial as well. Of course, we can move this Q. So let's just increase it just to see the Q. And there we go, expand the Q or make the Q tighter. There's also another feature on the EQ that allows me to audition just that band I'm working with, and that's this headphone button here. So when we click on this headphone button and we click down on the frequency, it will just play this frequency. So this allows us to hear the frequency that we're trying to find. So if we have a quick look at these filter shapes again, let's just click on 2. A high pass, for example, will cut out the lows and will allow the highs. So if we want to cut out all the lows, we could change it to, say, a high pass. Obviously, for a bass line, this might not be suitable. but perhaps a low pass could be. So this will cut out the highs and will allow the lows. So we can create kind of a filter sweep if we wish. We can turn that filter on or off. We can change it back to the bandpass. Okay, let's go along to mode. So here on the right we have mode. So we have stereo, L and R, or M and S. So we can have this EQ in stereo, or we can select L and R. So what L and R does, it actually allows us to set separate settings for the left and right. Or we can choose M and S, which is mid-side setting. So mid-side setting splits the way the EQ works. So I can just EQ the middle, and then afterwards we can EQ the sides. This might be useful for instruments such as vocals, so you can just EQ the middle band of frequencies. So you can get a fit in the mix, and then maybe you can go through and EQ the sides afterwards. But a lot of this is just going through and making sure there's space for each instrument to be heard. Let's have a quick listen to, say, the bass and the drums. So I'm just going to deactivate this piano sound, this electric piano, and this synth sound, and then I'm just going to play the bass and the drums. Okay, so what we could do is EQ the kick drum and the bass. Just make sure there's space for both of these to be heard. This, of course, could be done with sidechain compression, or we can also EQ just so there's space for each instrument to be heard. So I've just soloed the kick drum and I've just added on an EQ8. We can just go through and find a lot of different frequencies for this kick drum. I'm just doing this very quickly, but about there, about 58 Hertz. So let's go to the bass. Just going to solo this as well. And then let's have a look at 58 Hertz. If we pull this down a little bit, tighten the key, you can hear there's more space for the kick drum. So this is it with the EQ disarmed. Maybe even widen the key. It's just really about space, experimenting and going in and making space for each instrument. Let's just add on an EQ onto this plastic vibraphone. So I'm just going to add on a high pass. Just going to take out some of these low frequencies. Maybe take this one down a bit as well, number 4. Actually, let's change this to a low pass. So we've just got kind of this middle band here being played. So I believe the high ones were a bit too harsh and the low ones were clashing with this piano sound and also the bass sound. We could do the same with this piano sound. We could add on an EQ8 here. You can see when it plays, the dominant frequency is around here, so we could always roll off some of this so it doesn't clash with the bass. Of course, we can also go into the instruments and change the instruments around as well. Maybe even change the octaves for the part. Just find stuff that fits with the track. So I just quickly went through and just EQ'd some of these instruments. And this is without the EQ. Of course, I do recommend going in and spending a lot of time and just using what's right for the track. For example, I probably wouldn't EQ the bass as much as this, but of course you could always add on, say, a low pass on the bass. So you can roll out some of these higher frequencies. So when the piano sound, when the electric keyboard sound and the lead instrument sounded, it wouldn't clash as much. It's just about creating space really, and just having a look and listening to the different frequencies, so there's space for each instrument to be heard. Remember, EQs are used to change the frequency response of a signal, so this will allow the instruments in the track to fit in nicely and to not clash too much. So thank you for watching this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.